Yeah, I think it's about following your curiosities, if you ask me. Um, I don't know, like a lot of people just because they have a law degree think they have to do law for the rest of their lives in that conventional path. Or similarly, when you're in a big law firm, you tend to think in a certain way. Why should you be bound by a decision you made at the age of 18 or 22, right? Human beings evolve, your interests evolve.
Yes.
As your interests evolve, you sort of want to do new things. People tend to sort of let go of their curiosities and get stuck up on decisions that they made in the past. I've been lucky enough to follow my curiosities wherever they led me. And I think that's something that everyone should sort of do.
Welcome to a special episode of The Abstract, recording in Bangalore, India. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Viraj Joshi, a lawyer turned policy operator and now a key strategic leader at Zerodha, India's bootstrapped unicorn brokerage firm. Viraj works very closely with the founder CEO, managing cross-functional strategic initiatives, overseeing regulatory and compliance matters across the business. And he also, which we're going to talk about, works on investments for Rainmatter, which is the corporate VC arm of Zerodha. Viraj, welcome to this episode of The Abstract.
Thanks, Tyler, for having me. Great to be here.
I'm really excited for this conversation.
Likewise.
I like to start with some of my guests in the early years. You trained as a lawyer, like a lot of folks. You spent some time in the U.S. we call big law, at least, corporate law. What made big law the right starting point for you?
So, I graduated from National Law School. Big law happened sort of by accident, to be honest. Not that I planned for it. Most of my, law school life was around extracurriculars. I was part of the sports committee. I was sort of running a music festival. Whatever the cool kids did at the time, really. I'd not thought deeply about what after law school, right? I was sort of in the flow. Now, around the time law school ended, everybody was sort of preparing for big law. That's what most people wanted to do. So I went with the flow. I won't say that I really knew what big law meant. The pay seemed great. As a 22-year-old, the idea of financial freedom seemed great. And that's really what the motivation was. I'd not thought it through, to be really honest, but I went with the flow. Everybody else applied. I went along with it. I was lucky enough to get a job at Khaitan, which was, one of the big law firms in India. And that's really how big law happened for me. I mean, I'd be lying if I said there was some grand plan behind it, really. Even when I went in there, what attracted me to Khaitan specifically was back then they were running this rotation sort of program, which meant you could work with different teams for 6 months each before you sort of picked, what you wanted to do going forward. So for someone like me who had not thought through this deeply, that firm in particular made a lot of sense. So I got to explore my curiosities, just figure my way around. And I mean, that's really how Khaitan happened for me.
That might have been the last sort of conventional move you made in your career, I think. You ended up moving into doing some financial policy work, policy research, different parts of the Indian government. What was the single biggest reason you decided to leave big law and the more conventional path behind? And at least in the early sort of policy work, as you were describing it to me, you were almost like a little bit of a policy entrepreneur, having to go and like find projects yourself and that sort of thing.
So again, now one of the courses that I really liked in law school was this course called Law and Public Policy. That's the only course in law school that I actually topped. That's the only one that I did well in, right? So that was always something at the back of my mind that, this is something that I seem to like. At the same time, when I was in the law firm job, I sort of went down this rabbit hole of figuring out how to invest, how to save,
Mm.
all of that, right? Because I had all this money coming in. I knew that it wasn't sustainable for me to continue in a big, large job for, really long.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I had to find a way in which, that corpus keeps me afloat while I pursue my curiosities. So I went down that rabbit hole. That's when discovered Zerodha, in fact. That's the funny thing. I've been a customer for Zerodha for like 5 years earlier than
That's
I
amazing.
became an employee. Yeah. So it's the opposite journey to what most people have.
Yeah.
No, but so I went down that rabbit hole. I taught myself a lot of finance, and there came a point where I was feeling that, maybe I should discover something in finance. But back then, there was no real way in which someone with a law degree could just get up and do finance, especially in India. So, I mean, I wrote hundreds of cold emails. I would get maybe one or two responses. There was this standard set of questions around, what do you really know about this world? And I had no answers. Now, there, like, I sort of got lucky. There was this side gig where, the governments of Orissa and Punjab in
Mm-hmm.
India at the time wanted to do these municipal law, municipal tax reforms, essentially property tax reforms.
Okay.
Now, they had a budget constraint, but at the same time, what this required was a little bit of knowledge of law, little bit of knowledge of finance, and a little bit of knowledge of policy, right? So I was uniquely sort of positioned to do those things because, say, someone who's an expert on any of these would not have sort of taken this up on that budget.
Yeah.
I was young. I was curious about each of these things, and I mean, there I just got lucky. I found something that suited my interests to sort of go down that path. So I did that. I left my law firm job. I was doing this for about 3-4 months. Now that ended up being a wedge to sort of get a full-time job, in the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy,
Mm-hmm.
which is a research arm of the Ministry of Finance in India. So that side gig, side project that I did really helped with that. Plus, the idea for me in the long run was just sort of figure my way around the finance world. But at the same time, how do I do that? I need some wedge where I can say that, I have this demonstrable experience, which will help me get there. So that was the idea. Again, I'll be lying if I said that I had this all planned out. It was
Yeah.
just, like an opportunity presented itself. I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time. And that's how that happened. So, uh, I mean, that really expanded my horizons and sort of helped me, take that first footstep into the policy world and the finance world, both of which I'm sort of closely involved with even today.
You mentioned to me that when you were at the Ministry of Finance doing this sort of work, you ended up having the opportunity to work with a whole bunch of different stakeholders. Like, it's a very cross-functional environment in a different way than a corporate setting, but still very cross-functional. What were the sort of skills that you picked up working in an environment like that as opposed to at a sort of more traditional law firm?
Oh, it was completely different, right?
Yeah.
In a law firm, we're working with a bunch of other lawyers. Everybody speaks the same lingo. I had a bit of a culture shock when I went across the aisle, really. I was suddenly in a team where I was the only lawyer working with, an economist, a data scientist, someone with, experience in urban policy, so on, right? So all of these people spoke a completely different language. That's one. The second thing really was I had to be accountable for what I was saying, which really matters when you're the only lawyer in a team, because people are going to take you at face value and you have to sort of be sure about what you're saying. You don't have someone else who's going to correct you if your understanding is, not quite there. So that was a great sort of confidence booster in the long run, if you ask me, because, I had to be accountable for what I said. I couldn't expect that someone else to correct the work that I did. In terms of, so that really expanded my horizons. If you ask me for one thing, one sort of skill set, I think it's a data oriented way of thinking, right? All of these people had that data oriented way of thinking, which is completely alien coming from a law firm context. Lawyers are good with words. Lawyers are not necessarily good with data. And like there would be these questions where someone would ask me, why do you think this way? I'm like, this is how it works. But like the idea that you have to go back, give some data, sort of position it that way was alien. That has also really helped. I think that's something that most lawyers should sort of pick up over time. It really
Mm-hmm.
helps just express yourself better, I think.
Did this sort of experience working with, folks who are experts on economic models, really good at working with data, policy experts who may have a slightly different lens than a lawyer brings to the table? I mean, did this start to expand your view of what a law adjacent career might look like, maybe in retrospect, like very helpful for taking on a more ambiguous role than just Zerodha's lawyer?
Absolutely. See, what I realized around that time is that, ultimately a law degree is just a structured way of risk reward thinking, right? And I mean, that has application pretty much everywhere. Even in business, the business is thinking about risk versus reward. It's in, like,
Mm-hmm.
in government policy, everybody's thinking of risk versus reward. That's just something that law school gives to you on a platter. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the ecosystem had not evolved back then for you to sort of do something outside of a litigation job or a big law firm job. But
Mm-hmm.
that risk reward thinking I really picked up over time as, something that drives the world in general. And that's the one skill. So I keep saying this, most places need lawyers. They just don't they don't know it yet.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you had an inflection point in your career, where you ended up, finding your way to Zerodha and being the lawyer that they needed. You moved back to Bangalore around the time that COVID
COVID
hit.
happened.
A new type of sort of community started forming here. You actually met our CEO Shashank in 2019 on WhatsApp. Can you tell us about that? Can you tell us about how you started to like reintegrate yourself into the Bangalore community?
No, that was, I mean, it's a really interesting story. So
Yeah.
there was this WhatsApp group that came up around the same time, which is called Lawyers Not Lawyering.
Okay.
Now,
I
as
like
the
that.
name says, it's essentially, a bunch of people with law degrees who wanted to do something outside the traditional litigation or law firm paths.
Uh huh.
Um, as I said, back then it wasn't so easy, right? So this started off as, say, a support group of, because
Yeah.
everybody had what I was talking about around, say, cold emailing people but not getting responses. This was a common theme. Everybody on that group had sort of experienced that, where you have to fight against the grain just to sort of prove that you're equal to somebody else working in the space. So
Mm-hmm.
Shashank back then had just started. I think you guys were like a couple of years in.
Uh huh.
um, all of us were kind of in the same boat, where people would just look at us with a little bit of suspicion.
Yeah.
Like, what are you guys bringing to the table type. So this was a, I'd say it was a lot more than a WhatsApp group. It was actually, we did a bunch of events, we'd all come
Hmm.
together, we talk to each other, just, help each other out. So let's say some
Mm-hmm.
of the younger folks like me who wanted to, say, break into some space, there'd be people who are older who'd,
Yeah.
like, tell us how to go about it, what are the sort of things that you bring to the table, who do you need to contact, all of that. It was a, like, a very nice support system for a bunch of people out there. Now, interestingly, that's where I met Som, and that's how Zerodha happened for me eventually.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that community really went a long way back then.
What were the sort of like questions or conversations that people were having that made it really feel like a community, or made it different, or made you feel like, you could lean into the fact that you had a slightly different background or wanted to have a slightly different career?
I think that's because everybody there sort of knew what everybody else was facing, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people were really involved. I could get on a call with someone I had never met before, and they'd be willing to give me 30, 40 minutes of time just to explain how something worked. So,
Mm-hmm.
this was in that time where I was trying to figure, what next. So, I must have spoken to 5 or 7 people on that community. People were
Mm-hmm.
kind enough to give time, kind enough to sort of, so I spoke to a bunch of people working in, say, the fund space at the time, a
Hmm.
couple of entrepreneurs.
Uh-huh.
Um, they tell you what the pros and cons were, honestly, unfiltered, which is
Yeah.
really hard, in general, because Otherwise, people either tend to be on their guard or they're generally, I mean, they're not very helpful. That community was very different back then.
Yeah.
Even now, so like earlier this year, I was able to get into touch with a really senior person at SEBI,
Uh-huh.
which is India's securities regulator,
Okay.
because he also happened to be on that group 5 years ago. So even
Wow.
today, like, 6, 7 years down the line, it continues to sort of help out in its own way.
Do you feel like things have changed or evolved since then over the past 5 years or so, where maybe a slightly non-traditional path is more accepted than it once was?
I think so. I think 5, 6 years ago, the world or the job market rather was still a lot more credential based, right?
Hmm.
The skills were secondary. Today, especially after AI, I think
Mm-hmm.
skills have become primary. When we are hiring, we are looking for, what do you bring to the table? What problem are you solving for the business?
Mm-hmm.
Back then, the question was, what degree do you have?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't like the word, but it's democratized things quite a bit.
Yeah.
Um, your skills matter. Now I'll just give you an example. At Zerodha
Mm-hmm.
today, we have a what we call recovering lawyers. The guy
Yeah.
who writes our daily newsletter
Uh-huh.
is an ex-lawyer. The guy who leads our climate investments at the fund is
Mm-hmm.
an ex-lawyer. All of these guys have benefited today from the fact that it's democratized a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a lot harder, say 5, 7 years ago.
I think it's also, this is just my opinion, I think it's also great to hire people who come from slightly different backgrounds because they've seen things from different perspectives, right? You have
Absolutely.
someone who comes in who was a lawyer, who now is an investor. That person is going to have a great lens on risk. Presumably, they've gotten really good at also seeing opportunity if they're able to be a really good investor, right? So you get people who end up, I think, being slightly more well-rounded or able to see things from different perspectives.
Absolutely. So it happened in fact. So in India, the regulations around bamboo changed very recently,
Huh.
right? And this person, because he had that background, was able to spot that the regulations have changed. And then we invested in a company that has really capitalized on that in the last couple of years. So yeah, these things happen. I mean, it's quite phenomenal to see.
A little bit of regulatory arbitrage.
Yeah.
Tell us about how you found your way to Zerodha through this community, through this group.
Yeah, it was. So I was in touch with Som, who
Uh-huh.
used to work with Nitin, the CEO, and the management team.
Okay.
He was one of those 5 people I was talking about who had given me time back then.
Uh-huh.
Now, around the time the pandemic happened, I think is when Zerodha's business really shot up.
Mm-hmm.
Capital markets became cool,
Yeah.
right? Now, more people were needed. I just happened to be, I'd been speaking to the right guy for a while.
Uh-huh.
So it was quite natural that I made my way there, really. So my job description, see, back then Zerodha was much smaller than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So my job description back then was, just work with work with Nitin, the CEO, and the management team,
Mm-hmm.
and do whatever it takes, right? There was no like set job description per se. It's like formalized quite a bit since then,
Sure.
but I mean that again allowed me to explore my curiosities, do like bunch of random stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Some things stuck, other things I let go of, just so on. But that flexibility was really great.
I've heard, and maybe this is just for my benefit as an American, I've heard Zerodha described as like the Robin Hood of India. Can you give us a sense for how much the business has grown over the past 5 or 6 years, or during your tenure from when you started to how big this sort of business is today?
Yeah. So it's grown about 10x since I
Wow.
joined. Um, Revenues wise, I'd say when I joined was around in US dollars about 50 million.
Okay.
Now it's about 500 million.
Wow.
So completely bootstrapped.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, it just with the business, as Nitin keeps saying, it was right place, right time. The Indian capital markets had this boom phase that
Mm-hmm.
happened around the time COVID happened, and Zerodha was just like there already when that happened. So right place, right time. But it's grown 10x. We have about 10 million customers today. Um, about 500 million odd in revenue annual.
Mm-hmm. Let's dive into your current role. Share with our audience like where you're at now, what's taking up most of your time. If you had to think about a few buckets that the work might fit into, what those would be.
Got it. So I'm working with I'm working with the management and the Nitin and the
Uh-huh.
CEO Nitin. Um, Broadly, if I were to categorize in terms of buckets today, I'd put it in three different buckets. So I manage the legal team at Zerodha.
Uh-huh.
That involves contracts, that involves litigation, all of that. So we have a
Mm-hmm.
legal team, and we do whatever it takes to so from a legal perspective. The other thing that I do is around the regulatory and policy work,
Mm-hmm.
which again ties back to what I did earlier on in life, right?
Yeah.
In India now, there's over the last couple of years, there's been a focus on instead of having top-down regulation, regulators are now, adopting a more consultative sort of process.
Mm-hmm.
So they set up a bunch of working groups or say industry standard forums where the idea is that everybody gets together, all the stakeholders, you discuss the pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the call is still the regulators, but they're still
Yes.
giving you the platform where, you can sort of present your views. Now, this has come out in a big way. Now, SEBI, India's securities regulator, has said that any new regulation has to go through this consultation process. So, there are
Mm.
multiple levels to that consultation process. There are high level committees where, like where Nitin is Nitin's
Sure.
on those committees. Those are the sort of, CEOs of the market institutions, the exchanges, the regulator, and so on. So, I help
Mm-hmm.
him out on those.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are say not so important committees where I get to be on the committee and sort of
Yeah.
drive the work there. So there broadly there's that. So if I were to give you an example, over the last couple of years, I've been on like 4 or 5 of these committees.
Mm.
I'll talk about the ones that I am on because that's more
Yeah.
personal. So there was this one committee where the idea was that say brokers or financial institutions in general need to be disclosing a lot more things. So
Mm-hmm.
the committee's job was to figure out what the things are that a retail customer should know about their broker, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anything from net worth to say regulatory action to like number of arbitrations, whatever whatever information is required for you as a customer to figure out that this is the right broker and this is not.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this committee that did this for a couple of years. There's another committee where the idea was to standardize all the data that flows between various intermediaries.
Sure.
So before the committee started, there were about 80 odd files that were uploaded from various places by different people in that
Mm-hmm.
market ecosystem. Over 2 years, we have brought that down to 12.
Wow.
It
Interesting.
simplified it quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
That's helped us also in our backend processes. So, for example, at the end of the day, when we gave you your trade file as a customer,
Mm-hmm.
which shows these are the transactions you've taken, that used to take about 40 minutes to generate earlier. Now it takes less than 1 minute.
Wow.
It's simplified a lot of things for
Yeah.
everyone in the ecosystem. So things like that. I mean, these are all non-controversial things that are good for the ecosystem.
Sure.
Just needed a bunch of people to come together and work on it dedicatedly. So there was another committee where I was sort of helping out with standardization of bonds nomenclature in India. So on and so forth. Random stuff, but fun stuff. Yeah.
I would imagine that you have to really be in lockstep with like your product team and work very closely with them as you think about this sort of standards making. One, if you were surfacing disclosures in a different way, I mean, that's one piece, right? But if you're talking about being able to generate new information for users in a different way than you did before, or you have to surface it to a clearinghouse in a different way than you did before. Talk to us a little bit about how you build those relationships and how you make sure your team works really well with product.
See, that wasn't hard in my case at least, because all the product leaders were the same age, around the same time we were working back in 2020 when I joined. They were the friends that I would like spend time with on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
Now everyone has their own teams, everyone has their own structures, but ultimately, I mean, I'm talking to my friends. So
Yeah.
depending on like depending on what the use case is, we are able to bring in the relevant product teams, as and when required. I don't know if that's scalable.
Uh-huh.
That's a little bit of luck also, where all of us were in the same place working together on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to see how that scales as the organization grows. But
Mm-hmm.
personally, I have not faced that problem.
I used to do some standards making similar to this, not in the financial space at all, but more in, well, first in like, aviation, and then in advertising technology. We worked with a lot of outside consultants or industry organizations, lobbyists, others who had a real lens on who all the different players were able to advise us. Is it a similar sort of model for you, or are you doing most of this work in-house just with the team that you have and the relationships that you've built?
I think it's a mix of both.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that we don't have in-house expertise on. There's no point trying to sort of force fit that.
Yeah.
If there is a need for external help, we'll bring them on board. There are a lot of things where we do have internal expertise, where we sort of let the internal team drive it. It really depends on context.
Yeah.
Hard to generalize this, but you're right, Tyler. I mean, there are a lot of things where you do need external people to come in and give their insight. So just on this standardization thing, for example, we had
Yeah.
Swift come in, give their inputs, because like ISO standards and Swift are sort of the pinnacle of
Mm-hmm.
this piece, right? So you need people who have done it before to sort of give you your inputs. Yeah, I mean, that's how it is.
I want to ask you about maybe a third bucket beyond legal, beyond policy and regulatory. You do a bit of investing work through Rainmatter. Tell us what Rainmatter is first, because I think it's corporate VC maybe, but I don't know if that's the most elegant term for it. Tell us a little bit about what the mission is and what you're doing there.
Yeah. So Rainmatter is the investing arm of Zerodha. The way it started was, like Zerodha as a financial services business could not
Mm-hmm.
do everything, right? Like say insurance or say wealth advisory are things that were not core to the team internally.
Mm-hmm.
Then the idea was you want to partner with somebody and sort of invest in them and integrate them into the platform.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it started. um, when it started, it was just balance sheet investments into things that were adjacent to the core business itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now from there, it's grown quite a bit. Now, like Zerodha was lucky enough that profits were sort of compounding over time. There was money being generated, which could be deployed for other uses. So from there, it's now grown to a, like a fund structure
Mm-hmm.
where we are investing in fintech, in health and climate. These are the broad buckets that we invest in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The idea, if you ask me, is how do we help Indians do better with their money, how do we help Indians do better with their health,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that doesn't mean anything if we don't if the earth is not a viable place to live in, right? So
Sure.
broadly, these three buckets. We choose to be sector focused because that's what the team identifies with, really. That's what we value as people. um, the idea is to be a long term partner to people. So most traditional venture capitalists today have this 5 to 7 year fund cycle, right? So
Sure.
they have pressure to exit within a certain number of years, which sometimes forces them to sort of force founders to behave a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
um, the insight that we had was it's valuable if the founder can build in the long run, right?
Mm-hmm.
Partners like that are few and far between. Now, given that we don't have external LPs to answer to,
Yeah.
this is something that we can sort of choose to do.
A luxurious position.
Yes, absolutely. But still need to use it the right way.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, with that philosophy, we have about 130 odd investments at this point.
Wow.
even split between the three sectors.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is to be a long-term partner, because another insight that we have with the experience with Zerodha, Nitin keeps saying this, is you can't really build a business in 5 to 7 years in India. It can
Mm-hmm.
take a lot longer. Most successful businesses take 10 to 12 years, if not more. So the
Mm-hmm.
idea is to be around for the for that journey for the founder.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we have no like you need to grow 5x in whatever amount of time and so on. We
Mm-hmm.
leave that flexibility to the founder, and that really helps that really helps in terms of our standing in the market as well.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is to be nicer people, longer term partners, support
Mm-hmm.
people in their journeys, and hopefully the outcomes will show. So even the fund term is 15 years, for example.
Oh, wow. Uh, what are you noticing in where these startups are coming from? Is it a lot of Bangalore, Mumbai? Is there a lot of geographic diversity? Where are good ideas coming from in India today?
I think good ideas are everywhere. People in Bangalore, in HSR where we are, for example,
Yeah.
tend to get supported. But someone in a tier 3, tier 4 city
Mm-hmm.
does not get the support that they need. They don't get the money, they don't have the network, they
Mm-hmm.
don't have any of that. So if you ask me, the best ideas are coming out of there. It needs some amount of effort to go out and find them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't sit in your AC office in the south of Bangalore and hope to find a great investment. Ideas are everywhere, opportunities are everywhere, more so in tier 3, tier 4 cities. Um, and I'd say the best opportunities today are beyond just software, right? That's what Bangalore's famous for. But
Mm-hmm.
there's so much happening on the ground, working in, say, manufacturing, in
Mm-hmm.
which just does not get the support that it deserves, and which can really change outcome. Like, say, just as an example, in this whole climate thing,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think another dashboard is going to solve the problem.
Sure.
But say someone working at the manufacturing level, working with industry to change their process in some way, that's where the real value add is. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that that's not a cool or sexy place to be in.
Yeah.
It takes work. This is also a realization we've had over the last couple of years or so.
Mm-hmm.
So, spent a lot of time over the last couple of years going to these tier 3, tier 4 cities, just figuring how things work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think opportunities are everywhere, and the next set of opportunities are in these outside the big cities, in these not so popular sectors. That's where we want to be.
What was the learning curve for you like? You're taking over legal, you're stepping into Zerodha. You're also sort of learning how to be an investor. Maybe you've done some of this in public markets on your own. But what was that learning curve for you like, and how do you feel like you got up to speed and figured out what might make a good investment for Rainmatter?
Honestly, I think I'm still learning.
Yeah.
You learn on the job. I don't think,
Yeah.
like there are so many things that I still don't understand about this. It's been all about learning on the job, right? And also, like, see, when you're not sure or you want to get into something new, you can always choose to position size a certain way. So the early checks back from that time were, much smaller checks, because we really didn't know what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We thought that, maybe this has potential. Let's get a seat at the table by doing a small check, and we
Mm-hmm.
can always double down, once we build conviction.
Sure.
That was the broad idea. So we have a lot of investments back from 2021, 2022, which we are doubling down on now.
I see. Yeah.
But it's been about learning on the job. There are like new things that I'm still learning every day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm quite there yet. Maybe in another 5 years. But
Yeah.
broadly, that's the way I see it.
Uh, you work inside a founder-led company with a sort of very strong founder presence. He's a public figure here in India. What's that like? How do you feel like the executive team supports him and his vision?
I think Nitin is phenomenal. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, if you ask me, I didn't really believe in the idea of like a role model or a mentor before I met Nitin.
Yeah.
But everything he says, he walks the talk. He believes in it. He's not saying anything that he doesn't truly believe in. All this I was talking about Rainmatter being long term and so on. That is
Mhm.
how Nitin thinks. He's like, just to give you an example, inside the team, none of us have say sales targets or short term growth targets. None of that. Whatever, let's say new accounts are opened at Zerodha,
Mhm.
um, all that money gets distributed to everybody on the team, with the
Mm.
implicit understanding being that it's not just sales guys who are bringing in business.
Mhm.
Everybody needs to do their job for business to grow.
Yes.
um, he has this focus on like do right for the customer, and the customer will do right for you in the long run.
Mhm.
Don't pressurize your employees, your customers to sort of do things in the short term. Don't optimize.
Mhm.
Do the right thing, and in the long run things will work out, right? So
Mhm.
there's this whole philosophy that goes inside the team, which helps all of us in a way avoid any potential conflict of interest.
Mhm.
We sleep soundly is what I can really say. But yeah, I mean, just phenomenal what the management team has done. I'm learned a lot,
Mhm.
continue to learn every single day. More importantly, like resonate with the philosophies and resonate with the values that they have.
Mhm.
Because respect is one thing, but if you can't sort of if it doesn't
Mhm.
resonate with you, there's no real point.
Yeah. How do you, as a leader on the executive team, but also sort of a manager, how do you take that sort of vision or clarity that you might be hearing or seeing from the founder and the leader, and help translate that for the rest of the organization or for the teams that you're running?
So what the management team and Nitin do is they set guardrails for us essentially, that
Mm.
these are the things that are core to the organization. So, the same things I was talking about. Think long term, don't optimize in the short term, do right for the customer, don't try to make a quick buck from them.
Mhm.
Um, as long as those guardrails are in place, we have complete flexibility to sort of experiment in whatever way we want,
Mhm.
right? So we keep like nobody's going to stop me tomorrow if I say I want to do this ABC thing, which has nothing to do with whatever my experience is.
Yeah.
So the idea is it's sort of we're all entrepreneurs in residence in a way, right? We do keep doing our own experiments. We have the flexibility to do that
Mhm.
as long as the business values are not compromised. There's no bureaucracy that's stopping us really. So we keep doing that. Every 2-3 months there's something new that comes up. We
Mhm.
try it out. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, that's okay. That's not a that's not a failure on my part that the business is going to consider. So like
Mhm.
it's okay to fail also. That's
Mhm.
one of the things that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
In general, a lot of people are scared to do things because how will it look on me
Mhm.
later on. It's okay to fail, and I think that's something that really sort of helps us function on a day-to-day basis.
Maybe that's the answer. Do you think there are core lessons that other startups or other businesses can learn from the success that Zerodha has had, both from a growth and revenue perspective, but also from a sort of culture perspective?
I think culture in general for Zerodha has been a moat,
Yeah.
right? I don't know how scalable that is, or how replicable that is across businesses,
Mm-hmm.
because see, in finance, the idea was you have to be a long term partner for your customer,
Mm-hmm.
because trust is everything. You can't really
Yes.
advertise and get more customers. Customers come when they want to come, when they have money to invest. um, so all that advertising marketing doesn't really work. What works is word of mouth. You are going to invest when your friend or your parent or your sibling tells you that
Mm-hmm.
these guys are really good, why don't you open an account with them.
Mm-hmm.
So trust is everything. That's what the understanding from day one has been at Zerodha, and we sort of tried to optimize for that. The assumption being that if you do the right thing, like revenue, profits, it all take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't know how replicable that is in say consumer. right?
Right.
Because like you have to put your product out there. I don't know how replicable that is in a bunch of other industries. So it's worked for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's this thing, but generally, if you ask me, I'd say just do the right thing. Hopefully, results take care of themselves. There's no point trying to, there's no point trying to make a quick buck. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work, especially in India.
One of the things that I'm asking all of my guests about is a recent report that we did, our 2025 contracting efficiency benchmarking report. You know, we've talked a lot about cross-functional work today. In our survey of legal teams, we found that like 15% or so of folks say that they really feel like they're just being reactive. They're not able to be proactive, even though they want to automate, they want to leverage technology. How do you think that legal technology enables teams to work better cross-functionally and improve sort of contract turnaround times?
I think it's much needed. If you ask me, in general, legal teams tend to be at the very end of any tech adoption curve,
Yeah.
right? Lawyers are taught to be risk averse. Lawyers don't want to change their processes. Once everybody else has sort of shifted, that's when legal teams tend to shift.
Mm-hmm.
There is a cultural aspect to it. I think th- that is one. The other thing that I've always thought about.
Mm-hmm.
Is just that legal teams are cost centers.
Hmm.
Businesses are not often not willing to invest in cost centers. If you had say a similar product for a sales team, if you see the revenue going up, the incentives are there for the sort of business to sort of allocate to that. Legal teams, a lot of leaders see them as cost centers.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see the benefit of like what if this function got better or
Mm-hmm.
faster. And that I think is a big gap. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to bridge that gap, but I've always thought of it that way. There's always
Yeah.
a bit of a bigger push needed, if you ask me, to sort of get any tech changes enabled for legal teams. It's just always there.
Yeah, I mean, maybe legal is not a cost center if it's able to really drive and accelerate revenue, sustainable revenue. With that in mind, one of the things that we found was that legal teams, like 2/3 of them, are spending more than a week on closing their standard contracts. So not like complicated third-party paper that's being negotiated. Do you feel like, given your experience, this is a process problem? Is it a technology problem? How do you accelerate those sorts of turnaround times?
I think it's both. It is a process problem and it
Mm-hmm.
is a technology problem. I'll take the technology problem first.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these documentation is not standardized, right? We still continue to see these agreements in those old, photograph, not machine readable
Yeah.
PDFs. What do you even do with that? Someone's going to sit and, like, there is a data problem with a lot of the older agreements.
Mm-hmm.
With the culture problem, I think it's, as I said, lawyers sort of see themselves as gatekeepers, as this like final approval layer before something goes out.
Mm-hmm.
I've also often found that legal teams just get stuck up on unnecessary things that don't necessarily matter, right? Like I keep seeing this because I'm lucky enough to see both the business and legal end of things. I often find legal teams or counterparties who get stuck up on unnecessary points
Mm-hmm.
which don't solve the business objectives of their own businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what the legal team sees as sort of adding value.
Mm-hmm.
Adding value to whatever the transaction is.
Sure.
That's a cultural problem. I
Mm-hmm.
think it just needs businesses and legal teams to sort of work more closely with one another to sort of understand, what are the things that we can sort of speed up, what are the things that, we can let go of, what are the things that we need to really sort of double down on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I see it. One last thing, I think, in terms of technology solving this problem, I
Mm-hmm.
think a risk-based assessment can really help. There are so many small value repetitive agreements that legal teams are doing today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if an NDA really needs a legal team to be reviewing every single clause,
Sure.
or say a generic services agreement of some kind. These are things that can be automated fairly straightforward.
Yes.
At the same time, there are, say, complex agreements which do need input. So yeah, tech solutions like SpotDraft can really help in solving the first part of that problem, which will free up legal teams to sort of focus on the high risk, high value, customized agreements that really matter, right?
Hmm.
That risk based framework doesn't exist in most organizations today. Um, it's okay if you standardize a lot of the low value recurring stuff, I feel.
Hmm.
So we have been trying to do that internally at Zerodha,
Hmm.
to free up people's time to focus on the things that really matter. That's broadly my view on how
On
we are
legal
thinking
tech.
about. Yeah.
Has Rainmatter invested in any legal tech companies?
Not yet, no.
Maybe someday.
Yes, I think there's a question of being too close to the problem there, if you ask me, because I don't know. Being trained as a lawyer,
Yeah.
I'm somehow like naturally looking at the problems with each thing instead of seeing the opportunity,
Right.
which is probably not the right way to look at it.
Uh-huh.
It like we've talked about this internally about how there are a bunch of lawyers on the team but we don't have a legal tech investment yet. I think
Yeah.
that's the problem. It's about being too close to the problem.
That's funny. Okay, Viraj, I've got some closing questions for you that I like to ask all of my guests. The first one is if there was a piece of advice that helped really change your career, or a mentor that changed your career that you'd want to tell us about.
Yeah, I think it's about following your curiosities, if you ask me. um I don't know, like a lot of people, just because they have a law degree, think they have to do law for the rest of their lives in that conventional path. Or similarly, when you're in a big law firm, you tend to think in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Why should you be bound by a decision you made at the age of 18 or 22, right?
Mm-hmm.
Human beings evolve, your interests evolve. As
Yes.
your interests evolve, you sort of want to do new things. Um, People tend to sort of let go of their curiosities and get stuck up on decisions that they made in the past. um, I've been lucky enough to follow my curiosities wherever they led me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that everyone should sort of do. Don't I have a lot of friends who are still in that big law path, who
Mm-hmm.
don't enjoy their day-to-day life for whatever reason, but they're stuck up on the decision that they made 10-15 years ago. That I think, especially with AI, given that you can pick up skills really quickly,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that's something that everyone should do.
It's a great answer. Uh, what's your favorite part of your day-to-day work?
I think the investments at Rainmatter.
Yeah.
Now we have a full-fledged team who's doing this, right? I still continue to do it in small part. The reason for this again is you have the smartest people in the country who are coming and telling you about their business. There
Mm-hmm.
is no better way to learn
Yeah.
uh, than to learn it from the horse's mouth, right? So it's really cool that way. That's the part that I enjoy. That's not really core to my work day to day, if you
Yeah.
ask me. But it's not something I'm willing to let go either.
Yeah. Maybe someday you'll be a full-time investor. You never know. I think this is kind of a funny question. Do you have a professional pet peeve?
I talked about this. Legal teams in general getting caught up on unnecessary clauses that
Yeah.
don't matter. Um, as long as the business objective is being achieved, the legal team job is to cover for the risk while speeding up the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are so many times where things get stuck up in unnecessary back and forth on clauses which are, I mean, they're not going to change anything, if you
Mm-hmm.
ask me. This is something that I generally have felt about lawyers in general.
Mm-hmm.
You need a more, like, you need to be talking to the business more, understand it better,
Mm-hmm.
and not get stuck up on unnecessary things. That's something that irritates me fairly regularly.
Is there a book that you would recommend to our listeners? And this could be something that's been important to your career, or it could just be something fun that you've read recently that you think others would enjoy.
I think The Daily Stoic by Ryan
Oh,
Holiday.
yeah. I haven't listened. I've listened to podcasts about that. I haven't read the book. Yeah,
Um, I mean, I I don't know about career, but
yeah,
just as a way of thinking, right?
yeah. Hmm.
It's something that really resonates with me, where you sort of do what you have to do the best while you're doing it,
Hmm.
and don't worry too much about the outcomes. If you're doing a good job, the outcomes will take care of themselves.
Hmm.
Um, that's something I keep sort of, trying to tell myself on a regular basis. But yeah, that's something that resonates with me. It's a See, stoicism in general can be a philosophy that's gets caught up in unnecessary like detail, right?
Hmm.
What Ryan has done in the book is really simplified it to one lesson a day. You read
Hmm.
one page in a day. You have something to sort of think about, mull about,
Hmm.
which helps you internalize that thought process in the long run.
Hmm.
That's something that like anytime I'm like stressed or not feeling great about myself, I'll just go open the book, flip through a bunch of pages.
Hmm.
That helps me personally.
I like that. I might have to try that. Uh, Last question for you, Viraj. I like to ask this of all of my guests. It's if you could look back on your days as a young lawyer, maybe at the firm, just getting started, one thing that you know now that you wish that you'd known back then.
I think the fact that everything would turn out okay.
Mm-hmm.
um, Back then, because I was going against that conventional path,
Mm-hmm.
people around me would sort of like keep asking me, are you sure, do you know what you're doing? um, Parents, friends, everyone, right? You have like a great job which pays you really well.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure you want to leave it? There's a lot of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And in retrospect, if I sort of knew that things would be okay in the
Mm-hmm.
long run, I would maybe stress about it a little lesser, put lesser pressure on myself,
Mm-hmm.
and like, in general led a better quality of life if that had happened. So I think just that in retrospect, knowing that things would be okay is something that would be very valuable.
This has been a really great and interesting interview, Viraj. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Tyler, for having me. It was great speaking with you.
And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Abstract, and we hope to see you next time.